Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 131 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the podcast and also the coordinator of the training program within the AAVSO. Thank you for downloading and listening. The ALPO collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomena and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. If you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon by giving as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast and 1 year's membership to the ALPO. You can help us out by going to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Observer's Notebook. If you'd like to join the ALPO, membership begins at only $18 a year. You can find out more at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And this Facebook page, this podcast also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And the ALPO also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. Be sure you put that astronomy in there. Otherwise, you'll get some dog food ad. If you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way, you'll never miss another episode of the Observer's Notebook. And now, episode 131. Bye. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to this edition of the Observer's Notebook podcast. You know, this coming year, the ALPO is turning 75. That's quite the accomplishment, I think. But there's another organization out there that's even having a bigger anniversary, and that's the American Association of Variable Star Observers. They're turning 110 this coming year. And so we're very lucky to have with us today the Executive Director and CEO of the AAVSO, Stella Kafka. Welcome to the podcast.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Tim.
Yeah, this is great. I'm really looking forward to learning more about your organization. Now, before we get into it, though, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself and how you got into the organization?
I was born and raised in Athens, Greece, and I got a bachelor's in physics from the University of Athens there. And from there, I came to the US to get my PhD in astronomy. And as a graduate student, I was studying a group of stars that are called cataclysmic variables. So just binary star systems where one component is cannibalizing its companion. And it throws up from time to time, so it becomes a nova. But to study this kind of behavior, to study this kind of data, I used data from the AAVSO International Database. We're talking about a really rich database. At that time, it had up to 100 years of data of some of the objects that I was interested in. So that was my first acquaintance with the AAVSO. Mm-hmm. You can say I am an astronomy daughter of the AAVSO in that sense. I owe part of my PhD thesis to AAVSO observers. And this is a story you will hear again and again from many professional astronomers that are really grateful for the AAVSO observers' data that enabled their studies and their thesis. From there on, I did the usual postdoc/fellowship run around until this position became available. And here we are, 7 years later. I'm the executive director of the AAVSO. And I'm actually loving this community. I really am. This is a community of individuals who are extremely dedicated, mm-hmm. and they're extremely passionate, and they're extremely friendly. They collaborate, they work together in order to understand some of the craziest phenomena in the universe, and they're not afraid to actually observe under any conditions in order to unveil mysteries. And the cool thing with this community, Tim, is that we're sharing our results, right? There's no such thing as science that is happening behind closed doors. Everything is open, everything's accessible, and everybody's welcoming. So this is one of the things I really like about the AAVSO community.
Yeah, it's one of those organizations. It's very similar to the ALPO that way too. Is we have a lot of serious planetary astronomers, and we do more than just take pretty pictures of the planets. We actually analyze the images and a lot of work that the AAVSO does as well with their light curves and everything. We use in other areas of our organization.
Mm-hmm. And actually, not only that, you are taking pretty pictures and you are studying phenomena through those pictures. Did you know the grand spot of Jupiter is changing in size? And this is something that can be revealed only through pretty picture. The cool thing about ALPO is that it brings our solar system closer to people to boldly go, right? Not everybody is a billionaire to take a spaceship and go out there.
No, we
so
wish.
You're bringing it among people is really cool.
Yeah.
You don't wish you're going to go up there and come back within like 5 minutes. It's boring.
Very good. Now, briefly, you mentioned a little about the type of work you did, and a lot of our listeners are planetary observers. So a variable star in a nutshell, how would you describe it?
A variable star is a star whose brightness is changing within timescales that we can notice, we can actually measure. So think about something that a star that you go out and you take a look at, like Beetlejuice, for example. You take a look at it and you compare it with Rigel and you say, okay, so Beetlejuice is the brightest star in the constellation of Orion, as we can see it right now. And you go back a second night and you see that now Beetlejuice, for some reason, is as bright as Rigel. So its brightness declined. And you go back a month later and you see Beetlejuice actually being way fainter than Rigel. And this is actually a sequence of events that is happening through a variable star's life. Actually, Beetlejuice, about a couple of years ago, 2019, 2020, did dim like that. It became fainter than Rigel and then recovered within a couple of months. And this type of changes in the brightness of stars with respect to other stars that are not variable are giving us information on processes that are happening inside the stars themselves. I mean, we can't exactly go and take a scoop of star stuff and analyze it. And we can't exactly go there. We don't have the privilege to go take pretty pictures and see how things expand or collapse with time as they pulsate, or how one star is covering its companion as it hides behind it, or passes in front of it. So the only way that we can assess that is by taking measurements of the brightness changes of those stars, those variable stars, and compare them with the brightnesses of stars that are not changing at all. So it's a comparison study, if you think about it. So, for example, if you compare my height, right, it increased with time since I was a baby, but it increased in time based on a measurement, a specific kind of yardstick that we had. So our yardstick in this particular case are stars whose brightness is not changing with time. So you can definitely do it through your binoculars. Actually, Beetlejuice's changes were first noticed by visual observers who actually looked at the constellation. At some point, Beetlejuice was not looking the same way. The whole constellation of Orion did not look the same way.
It brought to the whole Beetlejuice thing brought to note that a lot of people didn't realize that Beetlejuice was a variable star.
You're absolutely right.
Until that happened, and then it's just like, oh wow, and then you start looking at it and noticing what it was before and what it became, and it was. I actually did a podcast specifically on that, because so many people were talking about it.
Oh, I'm sure you had, and there's an additional component to that. That's the fact that Betelgeuse is a star that we all know, right? It's the fifth or sixth brightest star in the sky. And because of AAVSO data, we know that its brightness ranges between the fifth or sixth brightest star in the sky. So it's variable. And we have actually data in our database since the late 1800s. We're talking about more than 120 years of data here. It's a very, very well-observed star. And we thought we knew what was happening. Like, yay, go us. Oh, Beetlejuice. Who cares about Beetlejuice? Whatever. 100 years of data. Who wants to observe more? And actually, when it first started dimming, many people said, oh, it's one of the usual, right? Faintings of Beetlejuice. So it started dimming, became the seventh brightest star, and then it started dimming more, and it dimmed and dimmed and dimmed to the point where it became the 21st brightest star in the sky. And this is where both professional and non-professional astronomers paid real attention, as in, okay, this is the first time in our recorded history we see something like that. What's going on here? Right. So my point here is that even if you see a star that whose brightness is changing with time, and we've been observing it for a long time, we don't know what we don't know, right? Yeah. Long-term data on those stars are extremely variable. And I have a challenge for your listeners. Go observe Polaris. And I'll stop here.
Okay. Okay.
Cliffhanger.
So let's talk about the AAVSO. A little bit of history of it. When did it begin?
The AAVSO became in 1911. It was formed out of Harvard College Observatory to coordinate variable star observations for the then observatory director, Edward Pickering. It's the same Pickering who hired a group of women to analyze plates. And we're talking about Annie J. Cannon and Henrietta Leavitt. That's what I'm looking for. Women who are legends for their discoveries from the Harvard Observatory data. So in principle, the AAVSO was the first association that was founded in order to connect professional and non-professional astronomers and help them collaborate on scientific projects. Interestingly, our incorporation document to the state of Massachusetts states that the AAVSO was founded for the purpose of promoting variable stars and kindred objects. So even at the beginning of last century, when all we knew about are stars like Beetlejuice or Algol, a whole bunch of eclipsars and pulsators, our forefathers realized that there may be more types of variability other than stellar variability. And here we are observing black hole binaries and neutron stars and exoplanets, which technically are not stars. So back then, individuals wanted to make sure that the AAVSO is involved with all types of scientific projects that will be of relevance and interest to our observers. So here we are 100 years later. We are an international organization. We have members and observers all over the world. And we're serving a very diverse community. What that translates to is serving people with different needs, different priorities, different professional preparation habits and cultural backgrounds. But all those people are united under the international umbrella of astronomy. Astronomy has no borders, if you think about it, right? So the cool thing is that looking in our community, we have individuals who are interested in using variable star for their research projects, but we're also working with educators who introduce astronomy to their students. We collaborate with a very, very dedicated group of volunteers. We communicate with individuals who are just interested in learning more about new discoveries and progress on variable star research. People who actively support citizen science and believe in our mission. They just our Oort cloud. They're just those who are looking at the AAVSO for information, for knowledge, and perhaps for projects. And of course, we work with our observers, those individuals who acquire data through the telescopes, CCDs, DSLR cameras, or binoculars, and share this information with the wider community through the AAVSO international databases.
Now, how large is the AAVSO?
Define large.
We
have about
membership.
We're 1,400 members right now. Our membership is increasing with time. However, we have about 7,000 individuals in our rosters. Not all individuals who are in the AAVSO family are members. So many of our observers are not. Some of the citizen scientists who are using the data are not members. So the community we're talking to is much, much larger than our membership. And again, we have members in 52 different countries. So we are international.
Very good. Very good. Now, this is being the 110-year anniversary. Is there any special events or gatherings planned?
Funny you mentioned that. Absolutely. So in 2 weeks from now, November, let's see, do I have this information? In 2 weeks from now, November 3 to 7th, we are celebrating our 110th anniversary through our 110th annual meeting, which is actually happening in Massachusetts, outside Boston this year. And actually, we have celebration. We have a variety of events that could be of interest to many individuals. This meeting is happening both in person and virtual, because we understand that not everybody feels comfortable traveling. We really respect all kinds of concerns that people will have. So we are offering in the virtual component. And events that we have at that meeting are from amazing keynote speakers. Actually, Andrea Dupree from Harvard is giving a talk about Beetlejuice itself. She's the queen of Beetlejuice. She's been studying this star for 60 years or something.
Oh,
she
my
was
goodness.
born with Beetlejuice's name, actually the first word, right? But she is the person who can tell you more about this beautiful star and what it's doing even now.
Fascinating.
So, and of course, Sarah Seeger, who is the queen of exoplanets, will be there, and other names, big names in astronomy. But also, we are going to have a discussion with one of the representatives of the American Astronomical Society's low satellite group. This is a group of individuals who are discussing the impact of low satellites, the new telecommunication satellites, right? That are being launched by SpaceX and friends. Yes, that the impact on observational astronomy, and this is going to be more of a discussion among our community members, just to address some concerns, because those concerns are real.
Oh yeah,
and also we're going to have a fantastic symposium for our ambassadors. They're young individuals from all over the world. Most of it's going to be virtual, simply because we can't expect those individuals to travel from India, for example, to here for 2 days. Plus, they have classes, so they'd better actually focus on their academics. But they're doing a tremendous work, not only popularizing the AAVSO, but also popularizing astronomy among their peers and among groups of their local communities. So these are just a couple of events, and then we will have an observing section. Our observing section leaders groups want to be there. We're going to have all kinds of presentations, discussions. Well, you have to be there. Join us.
Sounds like it.
It's going to be a huge party.
I have to look it up. Yeah. Now, your membership, is it specifically amateurs, or do you also have professionals as members?
It's citizen astronomers. By that, I'm using the term to include both professional and non-professional astronomers. Right. So we have individuals, who are getting paid to do astronomy, individuals who are not getting paid to do astronomy.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's pretty much the same way we're set up as well. Yeah. Now, what are some of the activities that members can do?
Other than observing?
Well, types of observing and other types of, data analysis or things like that.
You can do anything that is relevant to variable stars and is of interest to you. It can range from acquiring your own data, using data from our database and from other databases, and what we call data mining projects, building instruments. We have a very active observing section that has to do with equipment. Equipment. There are lots of people who really love hardware, and they really love connecting to software, automating telescopes, and building their own domes. And if you want to learn more, just join the group. Also, we have different techniques of observing different stars, starting with our sun, which is a variable star. Other than measuring sunspots, we're using radio for SEED, ionospheric disturbances observations. We are observing spectroscopically. So we have individuals who have spectra and analyze stellar light as the star is doing something. As the star is changing its brightness, analyzing the light through a spectrograph. Just imagine a prism, pretty much, a higher resolution prism, just to see different elements in the atmosphere, how their strength is changing with time, representing other mechanisms inside the star. We have exoplanet transit observations, a very active observing section with exoplanets. So if you are interested in studying planets outside our solar system, join that particular section. We have pretty much anything and everything. And the cool thing that the AAVSO is providing is a journal, which is part of the scientific literature, the international scientific literature. It is peer-reviewed, so someone is actually looking at the content of each manuscript to make sure that its content is correct, and it publishes correct science. It's actually double-blind refereed, so the referee doesn't know who the author is. And that's because we wanted to remove any unconscious biases from referees when they're looking at this kind of manuscripts. We highly recommend anyone who comes up with any result, no matter how small, quote unquote, it is, to actually publish it, because pretty much that result will be necessary for the next researcher to use in order to do their own science, right? So this is what the JVSO is about. So within that, pretty much if someone is interested in variable stars, they can just join us as part of our audience. We have webinars and how-to hours, or as someone who's analyzing data or someone who's taking data.
Okay. Now, it's a journal part of membership fee?
The journal is part of our, we're waiving paid charges for our members. Yes.
Oh, excuse me, what was that again?
We're waiving paid charges for our members, but the journal itself is what we call open access. So the results are discoverable right after a manuscript is being accepted. So people can actually see your research. It's listed under NASA's ADS services. So the results are discoverable. So anyone in principle who's doing a similar work on a similar star and the one that is presented in the journal can access the relevant results and use them for their own research. Okay.
Now, is the journal a paper journal or is it online?
Mostly, it's online primarily, but we do provide paper copies for those who request by request.
Okay. All right. Do you have different types of memberships?
We do have different types of memberships. We have full members for $85 a year. But from there, we have sustaining members for $200 a year. Now, I am a sustaining member of the AAVSO. We also have student memberships. We have limited income memberships. We have memberships for individuals from developing countries. We want to enable people to actually become a member of the AAVSO. I know how important it is for individuals to know that they belong in such an amazing organization. We're trying to facilitate as much as possible.
Okay. So if I were to start out observing variable stars, what advice would you give me?
I'd ask you to go to our webpage, and actually this is a new webpage. Well, you scroll down, you're going to see 9 beautiful big boxes, one of which says observing sections. So if you want to see what type of stars you're going to, you can observe what kind of information the stars are giving us, what we learn through variable stars. You can go there. We have a very rich educational program. So from manuals to online courses, etc. We have tools for observers. And of course, we have our forums. Ask your peers. We have an amazing mentoring group. It's actually a peer mentoring group where more experienced observers are advising novices in a certain technique. So I am a professional astronomer by training. So I'm used to not operating telescopes or not finding my own stars. So when I started my visual program, I just have a pair of binoculars, my little binoculars, I actually asked for a mentor. I was extremely fortunate. My mentor is actually the spouse of one of our staff members, John O'Neill, and and they live right outside Boston. So I was able to go to Sarah John's place and sit right next to my mentor with my binoculars and his binoculars as we were star hopping, and he was showing me how to do that type of stellar observations. It was actually phenomenal because it was this experience where you see with your own eyes something changing.
Right.
and that's very common. And I'm pretty sure it's very common amongst your community. And that's why Alpo observers keep doing what they're doing, right? Things are changing. It was just phenomenal.
I get asked all the time, why are we still observing the moon? Well, the moon looks different every single night.
Is it?
Every single, the shadows change, everything like that changes.
There you go. It's not.
So it's the same type. It's the same type of thing, and same with the planets and stuff. They're always looking differently.
Exactly, and there's this excitement of seeing something unique. And chances are that you're the only person who's looking at it at that time. Yeah, it's this kind of unique time in history where you're capturing a phase of an object. For the first time by yourself. And it makes you feel so empowered, as in I can do it from my little rock around the sun.
That's right.
And I'm learning something. And if all of us who belong in this particular group take data, not necessarily at the same time, at different times, we build a picture of something that is way, way bigger and much more dynamic than we are. How cool is that?
You're right. It's very cool. Yeah, this is why we do it.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Now, other than magnitude estimates, what other type of observations can one make in the AAVSO?
I mentioned sunspot counts.
Okay.
We are actually issuing the American sunspot number. And it's been actually something that we've been doing since World War II, I dare say, or World War I, one of those, simply because Europeans could not do it for obvious reasons. They were sort of preoccupied. And we're doing that. We are doing, as I said, ionospheric observations of the sun through seed photometers. We're still having individuals who are doing photoelectric photometry, which are extremely, it's an old technique, but it provides extremely accurate data on bright stars. So this technique is being used by as many observers can get their hands on PEPs, on photoelectric photometers, to study stars such as Beetlejuice or Polaris and gather very valuable information on those stars. We're also having a spectroscopy observing section. So people are using spectrographs or very low resolution spectral analyzers in order to acquire data of stars as those stars are changing their brightness. And it's really cool to see how emission absorption lines are changing. So spectra alongside photometry are extremely important tools to understand the mechanics of stars. This is how we do science. Right? You put all this data together, you try to understand something that is 4-dimensional. Time is 1 dimension, right? And pretty much, I think that this covers most of the observing styles at the AAVSO.
Okay.
People can do their brightness changes either with their eyes or through a camera, DSLR camera, CCD, telescope, whatever they have available. And, there's so many stars in the night sky that we will never run out of stars. We usually run out of observers before we even run out of stars.
Now, are variable stars still being discovered?
Yes.
They are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We also curate a super catalog. It's called Variable Star Index that has right now about 2 million objects and counting.
Wow.
Variable stars, even a star that you think is not variable, you consider constant, may suddenly show some variability for whatever reason. And we've been having that, these kind of discoveries nonstop, and making sure that we mark those stars as non-constant as we learn more about them.
Okay.
There might be serendipity, right? A star that is doing something very constant, and then someone is looking at it for whatever reason, and it changed in brightness. And here's an example. Earlier this year, a friend of mine who's running Assassin, Chris Tanak, posted a Twitter feed just to understand how science works, right? Of a really bright star that had decades of data and suddenly started going down, fading. And no one really knew why. You're like, okay, so what's going on with that star? So we initiated an alert, an AAVSO alert, and it turned out that this was one of these really long period eclipsing binaries.
Oh.
One star is passing in front of another every 40 years, 40. So far, we happened to observe it outside eclipse, capturing the brightness of both stars. So we're not doing anything. Mm-hmm. But once one started eclipsing its companion, then we started seeing drops in the light curve of the star. So this kind of thing. So, okay. and yes, there are lots of unknown variables in our galaxy, let alone in other galaxies.
Okay. Now, one of the tools on your website I love, it's a light curve generator.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used it for comets and things like that as well. I mean, it's
really?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great tool. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a tool that actually this is the second generation of this tool. Mm-hmm. It started as just a quick lookup of how a light curve looks like, AAVSO data, how pretty much they look like. So if you had your favorite star, right, and you want to know what kind of data exists on your favorite star for the last, say, 200 days, you will go in the light curve generator and then just type the name of the star and plot. And you could just plot the brightness change with time in whatever filters you wanted, actually. You could select your own filters. This new version of the light curve generator is a little bit more interactive and definitely more powerful. Other than providing the information that you want, brightness change with time within a time period that you can choose, you can select amongst filters. You can see how many observers observed this star, who observed when. Mm-hmm. If you are one of the observers, you can overlap your data to see more or less where it stands with respect to others. You can zoom in and out. You can select specific filters if you want to. And also, this particular light curve generator has the power of connecting to other databases. And before you ask, yes, we do have some in mind that we want to connect to, so that they can take data from there. So you see what kind of data exists on your star. So if you're a researcher, or if you're a student working on a project, an educator, anyone who is interested in taking a look at what kind of data exists out there,
right,
you should be able to go to your star, ask for the AAVSO data, and eventually see what kind of data exists in other databases on the same plot.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, I've played with that
cool.
quite a bit. It's pretty fascinating. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's a great collective idea.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Now, is there anything else you'd like to share with us about the organization?
I'd like to invite you to join us. I'd like to invite everyone actually to join the AAVSO, or even as an Oort cloud, an Oort cloud object, or a comet who would like to come and perturb the whole world. Come and join us. Take a look at our material. Join our webinars. They're free, seriously, and our how-to hours. We are open for questions if you want to know how you get started, what type of objects you want to observe. We can bring you in contact with our observing section leaders, individuals who are extremely knowledgeable on specific types of variable stars that can introduce you to projects. We can connect you with a mentor. Just email aavso@aavso.org. Again, aavso@aavso.org, and someone will definitely respond to your email. And join us for our anniversary. It's not every day that someone becomes 110 years old.
And no, it's not. And I want to congratulate you on that again. That's amazing.
Thank you. It is an amazing organization. We're hoping that it's going to be around for at least 110 more years.
Yeah, well, I can feel your passion and enthusiasm as we talk, and it's getting me excited for the organization as well. So I think they're in good hands with you at the helm.
You know something? We all explore the universe, and since we can't go to different objects, we need to have different means, and we would all collectively try to be as smart as we can with the data that we have in our hands. At the same time, astronomy teaches us where we belong. This is something that, as a member of ALPO, knows quite well, right? We are in a teeny tiny rock around a kind of boring star. Mm-hmm. And we're going to live for 100 years? Yay, go us. So if not anything else, knowing those scales and knowing how powerful our collective is, we are trying to leave a legacy, not only for ourselves, but for the generations to come, to try to understand really fun stars, really crazy stars, I dare say. And, as part of being humble, you have to actually be able to admit as a professional astronomer, I understand the behavior of this star based on the data I have now. Because tomorrow it will do something, maybe it will do something different.
Sure.
And new data will reveal new behaviors. For example, Beetlejuice, right?
Yep. That's a prime example. I mean, you got a lot of people interested in variable stars.
Absolutely. In stars to begin with, right?
Yes. It's not just somebody in a movie.
Exactly. And what's interesting here is another fun fact. Beetlejuice did not become supernova. And we can talk about Beetlejuice and its behavior at different times, but this did not prevent artists to come up with a concept of how Beetlejuice will look like when it becomes supernova within the next 200,000 years, right?
Yeah.
And it turns out it's going to be brighter than a full moon. It's going to be a source of light pollution, my friends. You don't want Beetlejuice to go off. You won't be able to see anything else.
That's a very good point.
It's like, where are my stars? Oh, that darn object exploded.
Yeah. Well, Stella, this has been a lot of fun.
Same for me as well. Good luck to everyone. My message to your listeners is to please stay safe, safety first, especially in the peculiar times that we live in. But also remember that social distancing is not social isolation. And every time you look at your favorite object in the night sky, think about all the other hundreds of people who are looking up in the night sky, not necessarily at your favorite object, at other objects. But this is something we all do together, something we're learning from all together. Exploring the universe is an activity that has no borders. It doesn't understand accents. It doesn't understand gender or tribe or anything, any background. All it understands is passion. It understands energy, and it understands collaboration, communication. So I hope to virtually see you at the annual meeting. I hope I'll be able to come to an AAVSO meeting at some point when everything comes back to normal.
Yeah.
Thank you again for having me.
Our last two conferences have been virtual, and we want to get that back together again next year.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Stella, thank you very much again.
Great pleasure, Tim.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. I again want to thank the executive director of the AAVSO, Dr. Stella Kafka, for coming on the podcast today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I know I did. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook every few weeks. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please rate and review us. You can also listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon, Echo, and Spotify. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon by giving up to $35 a month, where you will receive 1 year's membership to the AAVSO and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I'd like to thank the producers of this podcast, Steve Siedentop and Michael Moyer, for their generous support. Thank you very much. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the AAVSO, is in the show notes. If you'd like to get a hold of me, my email address is commentman@commentman.net or on Twitter at @ObserversNBPod. Until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening.